I think it's text 9, 7, 10, 9. And you ever think about Lord Nrsingadev and Prahlad Maharaj? Should I give you a little background? Okay. There's a painting up here on the wall, and in the painting on the wall there's a form of Lord Nrsingadev. The appearance anniversary of Lord Nrsingadev comes in May, if I remember right. May, anyway, yeah, May. And he's a form of Lord Vishnu who appeared to protect his dear devotee Prahlad. So Prahlad was the son of a super powerful demon. He was the demon's name was Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu had undergone severe austerities for a long time, with the plan that he would get a benediction from the creator of the universe, Lord Brahma, to become immortal, because he was so powerful. He could travel anywhere he wanted in the universe. He beat up the demigods. They were afraid of him, and he wanted, like, I want to be the Lord of the universe forever. So he wanted immortality. And Brahma said, well, I'm not immortal, so I can't give you immortality. Ask for something I can give you. And he said, all right. He's a smart man, kind of. He said, let it be arranged that it cannot die in either the day or night. Okay, no problem. I cannot die in the land, sea, or air. No problem. I cannot die by any weapon. No problem. I cannot die at the hands of a demigod or a man or an animal. No problem. And so he was kind of like playing a chess game. But he got checkmated. Because Brahma made this pledge or promise, so Lord Vishnu upholds the pledges or promise or the words of his devotee. So when he came to kill Hiranyakashipu, he didn't come in the form of a man or an animal, but half man, half animal. But Lord Vishnu. So the head of a lion, the nails of a lion, the jaws of a lion, and the rest of his body was like a man, half lion. And he didn't appear either in the day or the night. He appeared at dusk. There's between sunset and night, there's dusk. So that's when he appeared. And it wasn't in the land, sea, or air. It was on the patio. It wasn't inside or outside. It was neither inside or outside. It wasn't in the land, sea, or air. It was on the lap of Lord Nrsingadev. So etc. Lord Vishnu upheld the promise, the benediction of Lord Brahma, and he finished Hiranyakashipu. It was like wild, because Hiranyakashipu was very, very powerful, but he was finished. And after Hiranyakashipu was finished, he had many assistants, and they all came charging at Lord Nrsingadev, who finished all of them. And the demigods, who were afraid of, demigods means residents of the heavenly realm, they were intimidated like anything of Hiranyakashipu. So when he was killed by Lord Vishnu in this amazing form, they came to pacify his anger, because he was roaring, still angry. There's a whole chapter of different prayers. Nothing worked. So they thought the person who he appeared to protect was Hiranyakashipu's son, because Hiranyakashipu was tormenting and torturing and trying to kill Prahlad, but he couldn't kill Prahlad. So they sent Prahlad forward, who offered very humble and yet at the same time very eloquent prayers. Immediately, Lord Vishnu, in the form of Lord Nrsingadev, became calm. And at the end of Prahlad's prayers, Lord Nrsingadev said, "You please me very much by these wonderful prayers. Please take a benediction." And then that's chapter 10. We're in chapter 10, beginning of chapter 10. Prahlad said, "Please don't ask me for some benediction. My relationship with you is, you're the master, I'm the servant. And if I wanted something in exchange for my service, that's not service, that's business. I'm not a businessman, I'm your devotee. So please don't ask me to take something." And he then, Prahlad says, "You sent me here from the spiritual world to teach the way of pure devotional service. So that's what I've been doing. And because I was doing, my father was enraged, and my classmates were surprised." And so he goes on to describe what pure devotional service is in the next set of prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. So that's where we are. Canto 7, Chapter 10, text number 9. He's saying, "Vimuchati yada kaman manavo manasi statan tarhyeva pundarikaksha bhagavatvaya kalpate." O my Lord, when a human being is able to give up all the material desires in his mind, he becomes eligible to possess wealth and opulence like yours. And one of the things that he said is, what's the use of material opulence? My father had the greatest stock of material opulence, and in a flash it was all taken. So I don't want opulence. Why should I want opulence? It's fleeting and temporary. Spiritual opulence? If one has no desire for material opulence, if one's heart is pure in that way, then such a person can receive all spiritual opulence. That's the message. Purport. Atheistic men sometimes criticize a devotee by saying, "Oh, if you don't want to take any benediction from the Lord, and if the servant of the Lord is as opulent as the Lord himself, why do you ask for the benediction of being engaged in the Lord's as the Lord's servant?" Because that's a desire. The benediction of being engaged in the Lord's service as his servant, that's a desire. So you're double talking me. You have no material desire, you want Lord's service. Sridhar Swami comments, "Bhagavatvaya Bhagavat Saman Aishvaryaya" means Bhagavatva, or becoming as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, does not mean becoming one with him or equal to him, although in the spiritual world the servant is equally as opulent as the master. The servant of the Lord is engaged in the service of the Lord as a servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover, all of whom are equally as opulent as the Lord. This is the Achintya Beda Tattva. The master and the servant are different yet equal in opulence. This is the meaning of simultaneous difference from the Supreme Lord and oneness with him. So, step back and some appreciation of Lord Chaitanya. One of the great commentators or acharyas in our disciplic line, the line of Lord Chaitanya, used this phrase. He coined the phrase. He's the first one to establish the phrase that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are that there's a relationship of all things with the source of emanation, a oneness relationship because they're from the source. The qualities of whatever it is are derived from the source, and therefore there's a qualitative oneness. But there's also a qualitative difference, because that which is the source of everything and that which is coming from the source of everything are not the same. The energy and the energetic are not the same. The energy has its connection with the energetic. There's the oneness. And the energetic is not the same as the energy. Just like the clocks changed this morning. I was really surprised. I forgot. So then I looked at my little device that says when the sun rises. And the sunrise was at 7:28 this morning. So when there was sunlight in the dawn, it's before the juncture period in between the darkness of night and the light of the sun. So again, that's like the dusk and the dawn. Those are two juncture periods. But when the light of the sun appears, first of all, this is just explaining oneness and difference. The sun is always shining. It never stops shining. Well, as long as the cosmic manifestation is going on, it never stops shining. But there are times when we can't see it. But it's always shining. And then there's the period of dawn when we can see the light of the sun, these glimmers of the light of the sun. And then at sunrise, it's when you can first see the sun appearing on the horizon, on the eastern horizon. That's sunrise. And then it gets brighter and brighter as the morning goes on, in full bright light of the sun. But that light of the sun and the sun planet are inseparable, but they're not the same. Even the shades are drawn. At least over there they're drawn. The light of the sun is coming in the window. We can say the sun has come into a room in the form of sunlight. But if the sun literally came in the room, we'd be in trouble. We'd burst into flames. But don't worry, it's not going to happen. Because there's a distinction. There's a oneness, and there's a distinction. So, using that as an example, one of the persons in disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya, named Jiva Goswami, he coined this phrase. Lord Chaitanya's teachings are, there's a simultaneous oneness and difference between all things and their source of emanation. That's not exactly what Lord Chaitanya said, but it's what Lord Chaitanya said. He just coined the phrase. And where did Lord Chaitanya derive that understanding? He didn't pull out of the air. It's right in the Bhagavatam. Or, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. Or, the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Jiva Goswami was very focused on making it clear that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, and vice versa. So that principle, oneness and difference, has many, many applications, and here's one. And one of them is the opulence of the Supreme Person. There are, according to Vishnu Purana, according to Parashara Muni in Vishnu Purana, there are The opulences of the Supreme Lord are unlimited. They can be identified in 6 main categories, and he gives the Sanskrit names for each one of the 6. So those opulences, all wealth, all strength, all knowledge, all renunciation, all beauty, and all fame. So 6, unlimited. And then a living entity that's connected to the Supreme, to Bhagavan, the one who possesses all opulences, becomes opulent, like the Supreme. Very simple example, really easy to understand example. Supposing there's a big fire, bonfire, and the sparks are dancing as the heat is rising from the bonfire. And some of the sparks get carried by the wind, and they go away from the fire and they land either on leaves, dry leaves, or on the earth, or in the water. And so the same spark will manifest itself differently according to where it lands. If it lands on dry leaves, it can start another fire, because the spark is fiery. It has quality like the fire. Supposing it lands on the land, it may glow for a little while and then become just a piece of carbon. And then could land in water, and it's very quickly extinguished. But if you take that little piece of carbon and put it back in the fire, it becomes fiery again, because the capacity is there in that piece of carbon, or that spark, to be like the quality of the fire. Although the quantity of fire is different, the quality is the same. Big bonfire and a little spark. So what's being said here is there's a qualitative oneness between all living entities that manifests the opulence of such a living entity to manifest opulences like the Supreme Lord. However, there's a condition. What's that? No more material desire. So we discussed it yesterday evening, a little bit. And there's this phrase amongst those who are impersonalists and Buddhists, to become desireless. However, that's a problem. Why? Because living entities, being parts of the Supreme Living Entity, they have qualities like the Supreme Living Entity. The Supreme Living Entity has desire. And he doesn't need something outside of himself to fulfill the desire, because he's all-powerful. So his desires become fulfilled by his own potencies. But living entities aren't the Supreme. But we still have desire. And as long as the soul exists, which is eternally, then desire is there with the soul, because the soul is eternal. So you can't, desireless in the absolute sense of desireless is fiction. It's not possible. We have to go out of existence, and we're not going to go out of existence because we're eternal. So desire is with the soul. Desire is concomitant with the soul, Prabhupada's phrase. So the problem is not desire, the problem is misplaced desire. The problem is free will. Misdirected free will, or misdirected consciousness. And so what's in this verse is Prahlad, because the previous section was, don't ask me to take a benediction for... You have a place in the house where the child can go and make all the noise he wants?
Mothers. They can go upstairs.
Upstairs? Give you Leela? We invite you to go upstairs. Oh, okay. 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 Where were we? We're going to the spiritual world somewhere between here and the spiritual world. The oneness and difference between the living entity and the Supreme is made. There's a oneness feature when there's that yoga or the linking with the Supreme. And when one links with the Supreme, the opulences of the Supreme become manifest once again, like the spark that became extinguished, put back in the fire, it becomes fiery again. So the consciousness, similarly, of the living entity, and the opulences of such a conscious living entity becomes restored. Not in the same everything, like the spark doesn't have the same illumination capacity, etc., but qualitatively one and quantitatively different. Yeah. So, and another one of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, which is right in this verse, is a nice teaching given by one of the followers of Lord Chaitanya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. It's a nice story about his life. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga means, Vairagya means detachment. That's what the verse Prahlad is speaking about. I don't want these, please don't ask me to take a benediction. So that's the Vairagya. It's the detachment. And it's supported by vidya or knowledge, Vairagya Vidya. But knowledge and detachment that's disconnected from one's relationship with the Supreme, it's a shadow only. And when it's not just a shadow, but when it's the object that casts a shadow, that's the rest of that first line. Nija Bhakti Yoga. Lord Chaitanya taught Bhakti Yoga unto himself or unto the Supreme Lord. Nija means his own. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga means Lord Chaitanya's teaching was what's in this verse. That when one engages in service, Bhakti Yoga, loving service unto the Supreme, then knowledge and detachment arise. They're a byproduct. Byproduct means if you have $1 million, you have $10 and $100. It's included in $1 million. So within Bhakti Yoga, there's knowledge and detachment. So that Prahlad is teaching, because he said in the previous verse in this chapter, you sent me to this world to teach the way of pure devotional service. So the way of pure devotional service is when that connection is not filtered or impeded by something material, like a material desire. What's a material desire? Material desire, in simple language, is desiring something separate from the Supreme. The spiritual desire is desiring something in relation to the Supreme. Pretty simple. Here's another way of saying the simple, just like in the same example, the sun is shining, but when the sun sets, you don't see the sunshine anymore. Or another saying, Prabhupada's example, when you're facing the sun, you see light. When you turn your back to the sun, you see shadow. So material desire is shadow. There's desire, but it's the absence of light, the absence of Krishna. That's material desire. Turn your back on Krishna, you've got material desire. Turn your face toward Krishna, you have spiritual desire. Very simple. Just turn 180 degrees, that's all. Not so difficult, principle-wise. So, Prahlad is teaching the way of pure devotional service. It means spiritual desire. So that means he has knowledge and detachment. Vairagya Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga. Nija means his own. Lord Chaitanya taught what the Bhagavatam teaches, which is right here. Because Prahlad is face to face, not with the shadow. He's face to face with the Supreme Lord. So he's saying, I only want your service. And you want me to take. You're asking, please take some opulence. Please take some benediction. But if I want some benediction, I'm in darkness again. I'm a businessman. I do something, I get something. Business. No. Just service. And when that regard is there of facing the Supreme Lord in loving service, then opulences like the Lord become one's decoration. Not by some, because I want it. It just naturally happens. Like put the spark back in the fire and it's firing. You don't have to do anything else. Just put the spark back in the fire and it's firing. The original opulence, the spiritual opulence of the living entity is restored by that. That's the way, so same chapter, message, Prahlad said, you sent me here to teach the way of pure devotional service. And he's not teaching Lord Vishnu or Lord Nrsimhadev something he doesn't know. He's just saying it because it's teaching the way of pure devotional service. Squeaky clean, no material desire. Not no desire, no material desire. He wants devotional service. He wants the Lord's service. He doesn't want something else. So there's another place in this whole section, I'll end with this. There's another place where he says, if you really, really want me to take something, then just give me the association of Narada Muni. Because Narada Muni is his guru. Because so that's not different than devotional service. Association of Narada Muni means he'll get reinforced reminders and spiritual potency to stay always engaged in devotional service, which is what he wants anyways. It's not a material desire. It's a desire. It's a desire to connect one with the perfection of spiritual desire. And that's Lord Chaitanya's teaching, which is right here. One other point that Prabhupada is making is when that service connection is there, there's another very important and interesting dimension, and that's the rasa dimension. Rasa means mellow or taste, and so there's spiritual pleasure, or spiritual rasa, or spiritual mellow, spiritual taste. And if it's not on the spiritual side, it's going to show up on the material side, where it is looking for happiness through relationship with others in terms of friend or lover, or etc., etc., parent. Looking for happiness through those mediums. But it's already included in the spiritual, but in the spiritual there's no material tinge. So it's a further extension of Lord Chaitanya's teaching. That's the science of rasa. The relationship between Prahlad and Lord Nrsimhadev is servant to master. But there are other relationships besides servant to master. So the substrata of service is there with a friend. They have the idea to serve the other, but it's more intimate. It's like we're friends. Like Arjuna is Krishna's friend. Dear friend. Anyway, so then there's varieties of taste or rasa, and that's part of the picture, the higher picture of pure devotional service. Supposing that's missing, one turns one's back. then one's going to want that rasa and something else. So one looks for something else in the material realm, which is just a shadow or the reflection of the reality, and that's pretty prevalent in the material world. But the good news, there's a spiritual world, and far more living entities are in the spiritual world that haven't turned their back, but are facing the Supreme, and that's awaiting us, that life, and the mixing with others that don't have material desire. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. Tomorrow we'll cover the next verse. You can look at it ahead of time if you want. 7, 10, 10. Discussion?
Maharaj,
Yeah.
thank you for the class, and thank you so much for coming to Rochester.
Didn't snow.
It didn't snow, right?
Yes, we finished before I got here.
And I especially appreciate you talking about desires, because I've personally been thinking a lot about that in terms of working with people, and I'm a psychotherapist.
Oh.
So it seems like the desires, especially material desires, or the
Complicated.
selfish desires, the roots of these sufferings. And you nicely explained that there is no way to have no desires, that Buddhist philosophy kind of
It's a non-reality philosophy.
And I think Srila Prabhupada said that's spiritual suicide.
And which is impossible
which is
because the soul is
impossible.
eternal. And so I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to share with you something that I've been thinking about and get your feedback on it.
I'm
So,
listening.
because the jiva in the material world, we are covered by this body and the ego. Our original desire to serve Krishna is transformed because of lust, because of this karma.
Yeah.
And that's what Krishna also is explaining in Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And that the work that we need to do in terms of our spiritual growth is to transform these desires, as you said, to turn to the sun. And these desires, it seems like we have these unlimited desires. I remember I was listening to a class. Subhata Swami was talking about the Vedic psychology, and he was kind of relating to Freud with the unconscious mind and these unlimited desires that are stored in the basement of our mind, and they are constantly present and affecting us. And it seems to me that all these desires, they appear because of the core needs that we have, or as a living being we all have. We produce these unlimited desires to satisfy those core needs, and basically the only need is to serve Krishna, because that's our nature.
Yes.
And there's a theory that was developed in Rochester, University of Rochester. It's called self-determination theory.
Self-determination theory.
And I kind of like it because I think it goes along with our philosophy. So they've been studying motivation and behavior, and they concluded that the behavior, and especially motivation, bases or rooted in our core needs, and they emphasize the three needs: the autonomy, or basically freedom, the need for competency, or the wisdom, and the need for relatedness or love. And when I think about us as Prakriti, as eternal servants of Krishna, it seems like these needs, that's the nature of Jivara Srupahaya Krishnara Nitidasa, or Sachitananda.
You're giving a philosophy class. Where's the train going?
So yeah, then my question is that autonomy or freedom, then competency and the relatedness. Do you think that that's the good theory to base on for us as devotees?
No harm. I mean, it's just a model.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a little cavalier in my tone, but no harm. For you to propagate this in those who you're administering to professionally, no harm. And if you're to propagate it in an audience that's not, where does one's faith go? Is my response to your question. And so here's the theory. You hold it up to the light of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and does it pass the smell test? Is there transparency here? And it's a model. And one of the things that you and I want, that all of us want as devotees, is to make sure that the standard with which we hold things up to the light of is Shabda Praman. Not this other thing is the authority, and then that's the Shabda, that's it. The University of Rochester theory about human needs. I'll give another example, just because it's a trend these days in ISKCON. You probably know about it, the empathic communication teaching of, I'm forgetting his name right now.
Carl Rogers, probably. Carl Rogers?
Not Carl Rogers.
Marshall Rosenberg?
Huh?
Marshall Rosenberg?
Yes. Marshall Rosenberg. Marshall Rosenberg, ring a bell? He's expired now, but he was a Buddhist by his beliefs, but he was trying to teach people how to communicate with compassion or empathy. Nonviolent communication, there it is. Nonviolent communication, NVC, it's got an acronym. So, one devotee, Bir Krishna Maharaj, studied with him, diligently, and then he Krishnaized his teaching, and he has now written a book, and it's being taught all around the world, literally. And it's empathic communication instead of nonviolent communication, but it's just Krishnaized, and it speaks about needs. One of the core things. So, it's okay to do this. It's teaching. It's not Marshall Rosenberg. It's a model. It's a methodology that says we have needs, and violent communication is the frustration when my needs aren't being met. And my needs aren't being met when I'm expecting other people to meet my needs, and you don't meet my needs. So I get upset, or I go the other direction. I get depressed because my needs aren't being met. My strategy isn't working. So a core part of his teaching, which Bir Krishna Maharaj has written, and I have a disciple that's teaching it all around, in 6 different languages. So, they don't speak it, but it's a model. But it's okay, so going back to your question, is it okay, does it conform, does it pass the transparency test? And the persons who are hearing this model, many of them are devotees. But they know what the ultimate authority is. It's Shabda Praman. Aparusheya Shabda Praman, from the Supreme Person, who's beyond fallibility. And does light go through that model? Yes. And it's helping people that are struggling with emotions, and then with emotions that are feeling hurt and feeling this and that, not communicating in a way that it's the way that a Vaishnava would want to communicate or be communicated with. So it goes back to needs that are unmet, and looking for others to fulfill my needs, and you don't meet my needs, so we have conflict. And I have an internal and an interpersonal. That's in this model.
Right.
That's the relational part. It's a model, and it's okay. I find it's helping people.
Mm-hmm.
But the real help is the place where the light comes from, because it's incomplete without that. And that's one of the ways that Dear Krishna Maharaj has transformed Marshall Rosenberg's, because his teaching wasn't with the Supreme Person, it's on the other side. So your question was, is it okay? And it's okay. Okay. And those persons who hear it that aren't sadhakas or aren't Krishna devotees, they're going to get limited benefit, and they may start taking that as their religion, or where they place their faith. And that would be unfortunate, because the faith goes to what's behind all that. Or going back to the University of Rochester model, where do those qualities, those three divisions of things come from? So it's constitutional.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that young fellow asking the question, why is happiness important anyways?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's who we are. It's our nature. And how to fulfill that nature, you have to have that connection with the Supreme. The spark has to be within the fire, then it's brilliant. And the other is diseased and unhealthy condition. If you want to be unhealthy, okay. You want to be not happy, okay. And people are doing lots of... Anyway, so it's who we are. And who we are as part of the Supreme. If there's confidential knowledge, more confidential knowledge, most confidential knowledge. Levels of understanding. So in your professional practice, and even what you may be speaking when you have classes with the yoga group or something, you can touch on those ideas, but you for sure, not somewhere deep inside in explicit language. The connection with the Supreme is what's going to bring about a wholesome life. Anything else? Are you a question type person, or you're a quiet type person?
Quite of course.
Okay. You're looking to your wife? Is she also a quiet type? Okay. That's it? Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
So, with my personal interaction with people, I have seen some of the people, they already have a lot of sattvic qualities, and then there are some people who are a lot engrossed in other tamasic or rajasic activities. So sometimes I really envy those people who have a lot of sattvic qualities, because I feel that they did so much good karma in their past birth that they have very less unfulfilled desires. That's what my understanding is. And that's why they have so many sattvic qualities and very less tamasic and rasic qualities. So I feel it's very easy for them to become Krishna consciousness. And I keep thinking about it, that is it the journey, is it equally difficult or easy for somebody to become a Krishna conscious devotee?
Let me ask you two things. Let me ask you, if the spark falls on dry leaves, is it more likely to ignite
Yes.
than if it falls on the land?
Yes.
So there's the answer. It may be easier, however, this is the other side. There's a tendency for those who have asset to become proud. And it's not a universal rule, but to the degree the heart is just in the mode of goodness, pride about being in the mode of goodness is part of being in the mode of goodness. I'm up here, and others aren't up here with me. It's conditioned means the other modes of nature are still at play. Supposing such, then it comes out. Supposing such person starts to practice bhakti, and they start to feel something, and they start to be recognized by others. Oh, you're such a nice devotee. What happens? Commonly, there's pride. Now I'm not just, somewhere high up in the mountain. I'm at the upper portion of the mountain. Pride, it's a pernicious tendency. That doesn't mean that there isn't pride in the others, but the tendency becomes a little more contrasting and pronounced. It's hard to not see it. And unfortunately, such persons commonly don't feel it because they're at the top of the heap. Anyway, so the starting of bhakti, but completing it is another thing. Supposing someone's less fortunate, it's easier to be humble. That doesn't mean that everyone that's less fortunate is humble, but it's easier to be humble. And then they can recognize if I'm being lifted up, it's not because of me. That some mercy just came and landed on my head, or came into my life, and there's pluses and minuses in everything. But to start, the first answer is yes, it's easier to start. And then comes going the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming to Rochester, Maryland. How do we get implicit faith?
How?
Yeah. Like how do we, instead of, praying because if I don't do this, he will do something to me, or like, with fear, how do you get the conviction to pray with love, with implicit faith?
Here's a simple answer. Act in knowledge. What does that mean? I'll unpack it. When you act in knowledge, what happens? You get a realization. If it's knowledge, and you act on it, or you bring it in, and now it's within, and you're acting in knowledge, you get a realization. And when you get a realization, that nourishes faith. Wow, that was good. I had this experience. So then you want to go back to that source of knowledge and hear more. And you hear something that resonates, and you go and apply it. You may take, some time for application, and you get some experience. Wow, that also worked. And continue on that path by acting in knowledge. It nourishes faith. Then there's another principle, and that's the Sadhusanga principle. You associate with those that have faith, and it nourishes your faith. So your question specifically is how to get to implicit faith. That's like squeaky clean. No more samshaya. No more doubt. Implicit faith. So some doubt, that's good. According to Lord Kapila Dev, that's a sign of intelligence. Doubt isn't a bad thing. But when you receive knowledge, when you have a doubt and you ask the doubt question, not just one time, maybe it takes several times, and you hear, and then you act on what you've heard, then the doubt's gone. Arjuna does it right in Bhagavad Gita. He asked the same question 3 times. Because we ask the same question 3 times. Even when we hear. And then he's okay. He's at the implicit faith position. I'm ready. Whatever you say. So to get to that implicit faith position, we have to hear and we have to apply. Let's start with this evening. The main topic is the importance of hearing. So that's another answer to your question. But hearing means when you hear something and it resonates, it means you have to do it. It's not passive. Stand in the shower and you're clean. It's not passive. There's some activity along with standing in the shower. And then because it's of the soul, it's natural for us. Implicit faith is natural. The unnatural becomes cleansed, and then what is natural becomes awakened. Shravanam, to get to the place of implicit faith. Shravanam, then practical application. Okay. Hare Krishna Prabhupada ki